Good afternoon. My name is Ari Shane Weitz, and it's my incredible honor to welcome you all to this Temple Emanu-El Streicker Center program. Stephen Sondheim and George Furth's musical comedy Company has reopened on Broadway to rave reviews, and trust me, it's an experience you do not want to miss. I've seen it twice already. Tony, Grammy, and Emmy Award winner Katrina Lenk gives the audience life as she belts out being alive in the gender reverse role of Bobby. Stepping back into the shoes of Joanne for the third time is the incomparable two-time Tony, two-time Olivier, and two-time Grammy Award winner Patti LuPone. They are joined by Tony and Olivier Award-winning producer Chris Harper of Elliott and Harper Productions. All three will be in conversation with our moderator, TV, film, and theater writer Jessica Dershowitz, who previously served as Entertainment Weekly's digital features director. If you have any questions for our guests and you're watching on Zoom, you can enter them into the chat. Also, this April, the Temple Emanu-El Streicker Center will host Judy Collins, paying tribute to Leonard Cohen. We'll also host Jenna Bush Hager, Tina Brown, Chef Yodom Ottolenghi, and Allie Wentworth with Brooke Shields. Just visit streicker.nyc for more information. One last thing, please keep the people of Ukraine in your prayers. You can join Temple Emanu-El's efforts to support the people of Ukraine by visiting the link that will be dropped into the chat shortly. Now, please welcome Katrina, Patti, Chris, and Jessica.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad we could all be here today, side by side by side. I promise that will be maybe not my only company pun, but I will keep them at a minimum. I had tickets to see this show in March of 2020 that obviously did not come to pass, but during the long days of the pandemic, when theaters were closed and everything felt so uncertain, I just kept thinking about the fact that someday, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock wood, touch wood, I would be able to see the show again. We would all be back in seats again. You guys would be back on stage again. And when I finally got to see it back in December, I was not disappointed. As a single woman who turned 35 this summer and whose friend wished me a happy Bobby birthday, this is my Bobby year. And I'm so thrilled that we can all be here together to talk about this incredibly inventive and beautiful new version of this classic show. We have a little trailer showing a little bit of what people can see if they come to see it. So let's start with that before we get to talking.
In comes Company, the smash hit Broadway musical. Tony winner Katrina Lenk and two-time Tony winner Patti LuPone star in this deeply funny Stephen Sondheim masterpiece that's the best musical about New York City ever written. Time Out New York gives it 5 stars, adding, yes, it's really that good. Company, now playing on Broadway. See it tonight. Get your tickets today.
All right, well, you got to hear it, at least, even if we did not get to see it. But now we can see everybody's faces. Chris, why don't we start? Tell me when you and Marianne first started discussing reviving Company, and at what point in those conversations did you decide to take Bobby, B-O-B-B-Y, a man, and make her Bobby, B-O-B-B-I-E, a single woman living in New York, turning 35 with a lot of married friends?
Well, the idea for Company came about, well, Marianne and we both worked at the National Theatre together on and off for 12 years. And I produced Marianne's production of Warhorse and Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. And after about 12 years of being at the National Theatre, we started to just flirt with the idea that we might set up our own company. And when we did that, one of the very first things that Marianne said that she wanted to do was tell stories about female protagonists. And we really wanted to find pieces of work that really told stories about women, and preferably female creatives, female writers. We really wanted to try and kind of shift that balance back to where it should be. And so in 2016, we started thinking about the kind of things that we wanted to do. And I'd always loved Company. I'd seen it. I'd seen a production of it in the 90s that Sam Mendes had directed with Adrian Lester, and it had a huge impact on me. I thought it was an incredible musical. And then I just kind of put it to one side in my head. And at exactly the moment that Marianne and I set up our company, I became a father to twins. And they were born very premature in America. And because we're based here, our company is here in London, and it was very, very scary. The first couple of weeks of their life was terrifying, and they were very small. And I turned to Stephen Sondheim to give me some kind of courage to get through the day. And I listened to Adrian Lester's version of Being Alive on a loop on my way to the hospital every morning. And it was the thing that gave me the strength to really face what was some really difficult days. And on my way to the hospital, whilst I was listening to Being Alive, I thought, this show is so amazing, but God, it would be so exciting if Bobby was a woman. And I called Marianne and said, I've got this really great idea of how we should do company. We should do it with Bobby as a woman. And she said, oh no, that will never work. And I said, well, I'm at the hospital now. I'll call you tomorrow. And the next day she called me back and said, I think you might be right. This is a really good idea, but we'll never persuade Stephen Sondheim. And I'm much more a glass half full kind of guy. And I said, well, didn't he once say to you that if ever there was anything that you wanted to direct of his, the answer would be yes? And she said, oh, well, yes, he did say that, but he doesn't mean it. So here we are. All these years later. It was 2016 we first had the idea, and the show is remarkable, and the kids are doing great too. So it's all been an amazing journey.
Good news all around. Patti and Katrina, for both of you, what were your initial exposures to company? Was it from the original cast album, the documentary, other revivals of it, and what was your reaction when you heard about this twist on it that Chris and Marianne were envisioning?
Katrina?
Patti? I had never, I don't think I'd ever seen a production of it before. I was familiar with some of the music, and that was about it. And then when I heard that that Marianne was directing Patti over there in London, with this gender twist, I was automatically super interested because I'm such a fan of Marianne and of course of Patti, and I was so intrigued with what this idea was and what it could mean for the story. And I was very, very interested.
Patti, how about for you?
I was at school in New York when the original company was playing on Broadway, and I never saw it, but of course I heard the music. And I think everything that Stephen writes is profound and difficult, and this seems to be probably the most joyful of all of his musicals. And Marianne actually mined all the comedy. I think that George Furth would be extremely happy to hear the laughter in the theater. When Marianne approached me, I had basically given up musicals because they've destroyed my body. I've got 2 new hips and a new shoulder, and it's the repetition of musicals, not plays, but the amount of physical energy you need for a musical. So when Marianne called and said, would you be a part of it? I said no. And then I realized if I said no to Marianne, she'd never ask me again. And I'm so glad that I decided to do it. I always loved working in London. So it was, I was really glad to get back to the London stage. And as far as I was in a production of it, I saw the John Doyle production, but then I was in a production with the New York Philharmonic with Neil Patrick Harris. So I've only had the experience at that point with men. I also played Joanne and questioned why Joanne would want to make it with Bobby. That was always so confusing to me when I was playing it. And the fact that this has been upended and Bobby is now a woman makes so much more sense to me. Women get asked that question. Women are told that the time is ticking on your ability to have children, and men don't get asked that question. What's wrong with a 35-year-old boinking beautiful women unmarried? Nothing. But it's an issue for women. So I think it makes more sense with a woman. I think it's much more poignant. And in the hands of our beautiful Katrina, it's extremely poignant and moving. I could cry right now. I watch her every night sing Being Alive. And it's, Katrina is a unique animal. And Katrina brings something that is unexpected to her performances, which makes her so unique. And so listening to Being Alive sung that way, it's never been interpreted that way. And it is so moving. Katrina, I watch you every night, and we applaud you every night. I want you to know that.
Katrina, are you okay?
I just,
Telling the truth.
I need a minute.
Patti, while we let Katrina compose herself, how are you feeling? You were just out of the show for 10 days because you tested positive for COVID. How are you doing?
Well, I still have residual symptoms, and my energy is not where it normally is, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been had I not had the vaccinations and the booster. So I am all for the science, all for the scientists, and all for the vaccinations. It could have been a whole lot worse, and it wasn't. It was a combination of a chest cold and a flu with a fever and chills, and it was gone. The symptoms were gone in about 36 hours. I have residual symptoms of a cold, and my energy is starting to come back. So I'm,
Having flowers thrown at you help or hurt?
Well, while we're on that issue, may I just instruct anybody that wants to throw flowers at the stage, underhanded, not overhanded, at the feet, not the head, and please remove the thorns.
Got to protect the wig, got to protect the hair. How to protect the Patti?
It was shocking, and of course, it's hilarious to look at. It's insane.
The video has certainly made its way around my Twitter feed a lot over the last couple of days, but I'm glad that everyone escaped intact.
We so tried to kill it. I don't know how it got out because it looks ridiculous. It looks hysterical, actually. And it wasn't what they wanted to have happen.
No. Probably like best intentions, kind heart, not the best execution, right?
I was just thinking about this today. Maria Callas sang at La Scala, and I can't remember what she was singing, but they lobbed cabbages at her. And in a video that is of Maria Callas and that performance, she actually goes down and picks up a cabbage and cradles it as if it's roses. That is the sign of a true diva.
Well, nothing will be thrown at you today. I hope. I hope I can promise you that. Katrina, you came into this production. The whole Broadway cast, aside from Patti, was new. Patti came over from the London version. You got to work within the blueprint of what Chris and Marianne and the company created, but you got to come in and make Bobby your own. How did you even begin to create your take on this character?
Well, what's super interesting that I've discovered about the process of doing theater after having 2 years of not having it and going like, wait, did we do theater? What was that? So when you come back to it, it's kind of coming back to it as just with new eyes in a way. Mm-hmm. And when you have to do a show every night, you have to keep the character and the story alive and really fresh. So it feels like you're constantly doing a research project. You're like in the middle of a research project or in the middle of investigating something rather than like having written the whole project and presenting it. You're still like digging and finding things. So it started with just investigating, myself and other women and reading fiction and nonfiction and women's studies and just like kind of trying to look at the world this way. And then also still constantly just researching and thinking and digging around and things, because the show, the way that it's written, it does allow for so much, there's so much detail and then also so much room for interpretation and variation within it. So it's really a pleasure to get to constantly tweak and investigate things.
It's so beautifully introspective because so much of this is happening in Bobby's head, and she's absorbing the expectations that maybe she's questioning for herself and the way that her friends and their relationships that they project onto her. And those moments like Patti mentioned where you're on stage alone, I envision that as Bobby like speaking from her deepest self. Like how, like, is it scary being on stage alone in those moments, or is it freeing? What is it like? What is it like for Bobby? What is it like for Katrina?
It's kind of like staring into a void, which is kind of also like what it's like if you're trying to think through thoughts that are really scary and you can't see the end of them. So yes, the kind of the way that Bobby's songs are constructed in the piece are like soliloquies. You know, she's working through thoughts and ideas in the company of the audience, you know, to bring them on board with her, I guess, in taking them through these discoveries. Which is just one of the other things that's really wonderful about this show is that there's like, you know, there's comedy scenes and there's like crazy group numbers and just chaos is happening. And then there are these really specific reflective moments that Bobby has where it's just about thoughts and, you know, thinking through something.
Yeah, no, it's beautifully intimate. Like intimate, which is a crazy thing to say because you're on a stage with like a full orchestra and a packed audience, but it is very, very quiet and you're like inside her head with her. And Patti, you play Joanne, who is one of Bobby's friends, one of her older, maybe a little bit more cynical, jaded friends. Is that an accurate characterization of her?
I think that's been a common interpretation of Joanne. Mm-hmm. I don't see the cynicism. I see an insecure woman that covers her insecurity with wisecracks. But I don't know whether it's a wise thing to play cynicism on stage. It may come off as cynicism, but that's an unattractive characteristic in a person, and it would turn the audience off, I think. Mm-hmm. But I never really, you know, we're all individuals and we all read things individually. And so I don't, under Marianne's direction, my particular direction was different from when I did it with the New York Philharmonic. She has experience. She has 3 husbands. She has experience. She has a friend in Bobby because obviously they like to party. And I think you see her vulnerability within the scene, especially with her husband sort of nailing what her insecurities are. Mm-hmm. So I don't think of Joanne as cynical at all.
I was actually a question I was going to ask was what do both of you make of Joanne and Bobby's friendship, that dynamic between them? Is she almost like not mentoring her, obviously, but it's there is an age difference. There's that dynamic. The fact that you said that Joanne is thrice married and Bobby is, you know, a single woman. Like how do you interpret their friendship?
Well, Marianne did something so unique in musicals, and I think Katrina can attest to this. We studied the text and we developed backstories for our characters. And I think that's the first time that I've ever gone through that in a musical. Generally, the text of a musical is the last thing you work on. There's the coffee and donuts and the meet and greet, and then the chorus goes, the dancers go there, and the principals go into their dressing rooms and have a martini. But the text is never worked on. And Marianne worked on the text. And our backstories were how we then bring that onto the stage so that there's depth in the scene. And I think Katrina and I decided we met at, and help me out here, Katrina, if I've forgotten, but we met at a gala, you know, where both of us I would go because it's my class that's paying for it. And Katrina would go because she's a hip person, or Bobby would go because she's a hip person. And she would go to the Metropolitan Opera Gala or the New York City Ballet Gala. And we got bored and met at a bar. and found common ground in drink. Am I right, Katrina?
Yes, and I like too that we are. It seems like what we like to do is we get a great pleasure together out of how clever we can judge people or put other things down, or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's good classic New York hanging out, just like people watching and observing everyone around you. Patti, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I mean, that's what's unique about Marianne and her direction, the detail and the digging and the discovery of text. And it, as Katrina said earlier, it opens up so many variations on that line. You do have to keep it alive every single night, and having that research allows you, within the parameter of the piece, allows you to constantly investigate and emphasize in a different way every night, as long as it's true to the scene. And I think you see that in Company every night. It's bristling, it's alive every single night. Which is, I mean, I think it's because the text was so digested.
Yeah. Chris, what was it like for you and Marianne going through the text? Because Bobby isn't the only gender switch that you've done. There's been some, not many tweaks to the material, but some to make it a bit more contemporary as well. What was that process like?
Well, I think there's more tweaking than you might think, but it's all very, very faithful to George Firth. I mean, one of the very first things that when we approached Stephen Sondheim about whether he would allow us to meddle with what was already a masterpiece, was he said, look, George Firth's not here, so he can't answer for whether or not you should or shouldn't change this. He said, so you can fiddle around with it, but you can't rewrite it. So it was kind of an interesting challenge, really, is could we tell this story through the eyes of Bobby now? I mean, that's also the key part, is it's set now, it's set today, or now-ish is what we think about it. So what was clear was that, the gender dynamics have changed so significantly from the 70s. So what we did was an awful lot of the characters are regendered, not just Bobby. So one of the original characters was Amy and is now Jamie. And a lot of the couples, the dialogue in the couples is just switched gender. So it's not just Bobby that switched, it's a number of people throughout the production and words that were previously said by. So there are quite a lot of changes, but not rewrites. So it's all originally George Firth, and it was, and we did actually, right at the very beginning, we went back to George Firth had originally written it as a play, and he'd also written a screen version of it. So we went back to all of the manuscripts of all of his notebooks, and we went back to everything that he'd ever written in relation to Company. And there were speeches that we thought, well, maybe we'd pull this and maybe we'll pull that in, and there were lines that we'd pull in from other versions of it. But actually, in the end, we hardly used anything other than what had originally been done in the 1970 production of Company. It's, as I say, it's moved around. The chairs are in different places sometimes, but there's very few. In fact, I think the only real significant change is the real change of Joanne saying, offering her husband to Bobby. So everything else is pretty much as written, just in a different order. But it was very interesting to go through that process of investigating, interrogating all the George Firth material, but still to come back to the conclusion that what he'd written was absolutely extraordinary to begin with.
Absolutely. And when you put it in this more modern lens, it can take on different meanings without even having to change too much to it. I remember I spoke with Marianne in February of 2020, a very 2 years and 1,000 lifetimes ago. And we talked about Another 100 People and how it's a song about the vibrancy of New York, but she also saw it as a bit about online dating and how you can just swipe through another 100 people, another 100 people, another 100 people, and the difficulty of forming connections that way. And I just, first of all, I nearly hit under the table because as somebody who has been on both sides of that, I understood, but it was so true. And I'm curious for each of you, are there moments like that, songs, sequences in the show that you're just like, wow, this really just takes on such a different resonance now? are there parts that are yours or just in general in the show?
One thing that struck me was the homosexual couple and Jamie saying to Paul, just because we can get married doesn't mean we should, which resonates considering how long it took the fight to have same-sex marriages and the attack our LGBTQ community is under in this country now. Yeah. That resonates a lot for me. I mean, I'm always moved when I hear it. For me, that's the most powerful line for me.
Katrina, what about for you?
I'm so sorry, my internet froze while you were asking this question. Can you just briefly sum what it is?
Absolutely. We're just talking about if there was a specific scene or a song or a moment that really, in this version of the show struck you as being especially resonant. I was talking about Another 100 People and just the feelings of online dating. The TikTok sequence certainly feels very different when a woman is hearing the clock ticking versus a man. One of those. Anything else?
Yeah, I would totally agree that TikTok, and even while it's happening, I'm still wondering, like, how was this before? Well, I know it's usually, what I've heard is that it's not usually in the original version when it's done, but when it was done, like, what was a sexy dance? Wait, what? What? So I think that resonates really wonderfully in this construct, and also. The way being alive can potentially resonate with so many of us who have experienced, loss in the past 2 years in a way that is rather large. That kind of resonates in a different way, I think, too.
I think the set also does so much work for you in terms of, I noticed the little 35s everywhere and just the beautiful way that she climbs in and out of these different vignettes. Chris, what was that conceptualization? It's a long word, but what was that process like for you guys, really figuring that out?
Hard, because when we did the show in London initially, we couldn't afford that set. But so Marianne and Bunny had been designing something else. And when they showed it to me, I was like, yeah, okay. And they said, but we have this other version of the set that we really can't afford. And then when I saw it, I just kind of fell to the floor. It was so extraordinary, the set that we now have. And I said, we have to have that set. There is absolutely no way we can do this production without that design, because Bunny Christie is such a huge visionary, and to have clipped her wings would have been absolutely, well, it would have just been truly devastating, because I think what Bunny's design does is bring so much to the realization of it being modern and now, but also just the whole Alice in Wonderland magic of it. So I often, we scraped together to make the physical, but it was worth it. I mean, actually, it's now very automated in New York, but it was not automated in London. There were people pushing on boxes, which was very, it looked great, but it was quite painful for those people pushing and pulling. So I can't tell you how happy we were when we brought it to Broadway that we could automate it. So, but it's a magnificent design. I mean, Bunny is just a true genius of the theatre.
I have to interrupt for a second. Everybody holds their breath in the first box's move. Because that's the trickiest move. When Katrina is in the nightmare box and the first scene box come down and the company box goes off, it's just everybody's backstage going, are we...
Deep breath.
Well, and in London, it had an even trickier direction. It had to actually almost turn a corner to come out of the wings. It couldn't go straight off. So, when we were pushing and pulling it in London, it was crazy. So now it moves so effortlessly in New York. It's even more beautiful.
It's amazing. I'd love if we could show people a little bit of what that looks like and what you guys sound like. We have the opening number that I would love to show everybody. So if we could roll that clip.
Bobby, 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 baby, Bobby, honey, boo-boo, Bobby, darling, Bobby, we've been trying to call you. Bobby, booby, hey, Charles, I've got something to tell you. Bobby, honey, Bobby, we've been trying to reach you all day. Hello, Bobby, there was something we wanted to say. We got to message Bobby, honey, Bobby, how have you been? Stop fine on your way home, Bobby, since we've been thinking of you. Stop fine anytime, Bobby, there's a concert on Tuesday. I guess every day in town. Tomorrow on Sunday, the beach next weekend. Saturday night. Bobby, movie time we got together is Wednesday, alright. Bobby day, Bobby, come on over for dinner. We'll be so glad to see you. Bobby, come on over for dinner. Just be the three of us, only the three of us. We love.
Phone rings, door chimes, in comes company. No strings, good times, room hums company. Late nights, quick bites, party games, deep talks, long walks, telephone calls. Thoughts shared, souls bared, private names, all those photos up on the walls. With love, filling the days. With love, 70 ways to Bobby with love from all those good and crazy people, my friends. Those good and crazy people, my merry friends. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? That's what it's really about, really about.
Bobby, 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 baby, Bobby, Bobby, darling, boo-boo, sweetie,
Angel, will you do us a favor?
Bobby, Bobby, no, love, I'd like your opinion. Bobby, girl,
Bobby, Peter.
Bobby, there's a Bobby, I need your advice. Just half an hour, Bobby, if you visit the kids once or twice. Bobby, honey, Bobby, Dana, where have you been? Listen, pal, I have to work Thursday evening. Bobby, love, you know how I hate the opera. Bobby, we've been Bobby, just show you, baby, Bobby, sweetie, Bobby, 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 come on over for dinner. We'll be so glad to see you. Bobby, come on over for dinner. Just be the three of us, only the three of us. We phone rings, door chimes, in comes company. No strings, good times, just drums company. Late nights, quick bites, party games, deep talks, long walks, telephone calls. Thoughts shared, souls bared, private names, all those photos up on the walls. With love, filling the days. With love, 70 ways to Bobby with love from all these good and crazy people, your friends. These good and crazy people, your married friends. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? That's what it's really about, isn't it? That's what it's really about, really about. Company, lots of company. Life is company, love is company.
so good. Katrina, I love that jumpsuit so much.
Yeah, that jumpsuit's great.
I have, now that
Funny,
the world is
crispy.
amazing, I have like definitely been looking for like a couple of friends that are getting married later this year. And I have literally thought of that jumpsuit as a like, well, what if I wore something like that? So it definitely had an impact. What a wonderful opening number, and what a fabulous cast. This entire ensemble is so incredible and stacked with so many fabulous people. I want to give the three of you the floor to just gush about your colleagues a little bit. What is it like working with this whole cast?
Can I jump in there? This
Yes,
is the
go
most
ahead.
extraordinary bunch of actors I've ever worked with my whole life. We had listen, we've all been through something so traumatic the last 2 years. But I have never worked with such, the whole group of actors are beyond talented. I mean, every single one of them has so much experience, but it's the heart and the warmth of these actors that is just so overwhelming. It's been truly, truly one of the most extraordinary experiences I've ever had because of the talent and the humanity of everybody in this cast. It's been remarkable. I love every single one of them so deeply, and I'm missing them. I've been away for about I haven't seen the show for 4 weeks, and just watching that 5-minute clip I almost cried. They are truly, truly remarkable. And particularly being led by these two extraordinary women, they are the best.
I'd like to say that, we didn't know each other that well when we were in the first rehearsal period. And we were, I think, 9 previews in.
9.
Before we were shut down. And then 2 years passed, or 18 months passed, and then we came back. And I remember the first day of rehearsal where we were all vulnerable, I think emotionally stressed, individually emotionally stressed, and confused about the entire experience that we had just gone through. And would this last? Would we be shut down again? There was a great, fear of the same thing happening again. And it created a bond with the people in this environment. And that was extraordinary because this company is incredibly generous, incredibly supportive, incredibly loving, incredibly forgiving. There's no ego. There's just a huge embrace. And that is the most unique experience that I've ever had in a musical, which are by their very nature vicious beasts. They're competitive. They're, especially with a hit, it goes south faster than a flop. You can't kill a flop, but you can kill a musical by entitlement, a hit musical by entitlement, which happens a lot. And this, because everybody is a seasoned actor, and because everybody is a principal in this, and our understudies are also extraordinary, and because of what we went through individually and came together, these were the first people we had seen really since lockdown. It created an environment that is strong to this day, and phenomenal, just a phenomenal experience.
Katrina, what about you?
Yes. And to speak more about our understudies, we are so lucky to have the understudies that we have, and also that we were able to share the whole rehearsal process with them. Usually the understudies come in, maybe once we get to previews, and then they just have to kind of sit and watch from the theater, from the house, and be sort of distanced. And they were with us every step of the way, and is sitting in on rehearsals with us, sometimes going in if one of us had to go to a fitting or whatever. So it feels very much like we are all one team. And then to get to see them go on during previews, often because of COVID, which is also an unusual situation, like Chris was saying at the beginning. they're all extremely prepared and dynamic actors, and it's so much fun to play with and they're allowed to bring their own versions of these characters on stage with them. And it's just been really an extraordinary experience, not only to work with the principals every night and then to get to enjoy and watch and witness the brilliant performances from our understudies. It's just really incredible.
Amazing. I've been so heartened too to see the appreciation that has always been there, but just maybe louder for understudies and swings and the people that have to do so much work that, on the turn of a dime, having different tracks, having to cover different people and jump in sometimes with very little notice. It's been very exciting. And I think, great that work is also understood and celebrated. Patti, you talked about this a little bit, but you guys obviously were shut down for a long time, like the rest of Broadway, and then came back. And aside from rehearsals, how has it felt different being back on stage again after so much time away?
Well, we're still under the cloud of COVID, and it hasn't gone away. Obviously, there were three of us this past week, three of us, me, Renee Daniels, and our conductor. But being back on the boards, nothing's changed. And I mean, that's the relief, I have to say, because I think I can only speak for myself. I wondered whether, in fact, I wanted to go back in that period of time when I was faced with what felt like retirement. I got used to doing nothing, and I didn't know whether I would have the energy, because musicals take a phenomenal amount of energy. They say Broadway ain't for sissies. Boy, is that true. 8 shows a week of repetition, and this one is quite a physical show. I didn't know whether I wanted to return or not, and not just to company, but to the stage, to the business. I thought, okay, if this is retirement, I'll figure it out. So going back to how those first couple of days of rehearsal went, I was on the verge of tears all the time from fear and indecision. But once we got to the stage and what we all knew was familiar, it was at least for me, as if I had never left. I mean, you put your foot on that stage and you sink into it if you want to. And I always want to.
Katrina, what was the experience like for you coming back?
Similarly, like it felt so far away and foreign and so super familiar and close at the same time, which was a very weird thing to hold in your head, these two opposing feelings. And I think the rehearsal was like that a lot. And there was immense gratitude and relief to be able to get to do this thing that we thought we'd never get to do again, not only just theater, but then this specific show, like we never take it for granted. That, and then also the stress of worrying about getting sick and all the things we had to do to prevent and protect each other. And so it was a very Sondheim-esque experience of holding opposing things at the same time. And there was a moment during this second tech rehearsal where Matt Doyle and I were on the bed and there was some lights or something, like something's happening, and we're just sitting there on the bed, and we were like, oh my God, we did this exact same thing almost 2 years ago. How are we in the same spot right now? What? Like, and your brain's like, I can't understand how this was just yesterday, but no, that was 2 years ago. So there was a lot of that happening too.
I understand that Twilight Zone-y feeling very much. Like, I went back into my office for the first time, and all of my notes from March 2020, my to-do lists were like intact, and you're just like, whoa. It's a freaky thing. So I understand that feeling very, very strongly. We have some questions from our wonderful audience that I want to get to. This was one asked by Bess and a few other people who wanted to know how involved Stephen Sondheim was with this production. Chris, I remember reading in one of his last interviews that he was initially somewhat skeptical about this concept, about the gender switch. So first of all, how do you go about changing the mind of Stephen Sondheim? And then second, what was it like to work with him as a collaborator on this?
Well, he was extraordinary with us. I mean, he was an extraordinary collaborator, and it's true. He was initially skeptical about it. Despite my optimism that we'd persuade him, he said, "I'm not sure. I don't really know." He said, "Look, I mean, he was, I think, 80 something when we approached him, and he's in his late 80s. And he said, I don't know about a 35-year-old woman. When I was writing this, I was writing it as a 35-year-old guy. So is there enough in the material that speaks to what it is to be a 35-year-old woman?" But he was very generous in that he said, do a workshop of it. If you can do a workshop and you can convince yourselves that the idea works, then I'm sure you'll have a good chance at convincing us. So we did the workshop in London, and we just did a week. And we had an extraordinary bunch of actors who we worked through the material with, Marianne and Joel Fram, our musical supervisor. And it was clear on day one that the idea worked. It was really clear. And that was nerve-wracking because he wasn't going to come. We just had to record the video and we had to send it to him. And on the day we recorded it, I said to the guy who was doing the video, I said, did you get that? Did you get it all? And he said, yeah. He said, it's so good. He said, is it a new musical? And I said, no. In fact, it's nearly 50 years old. And originally Bobby was a guy. And he said, oh, no, that would not work at all. And so we told Steve that. And that was a significant moment in him deciding that there was something in it. And even up until the very first preview in London, he still wasn't entirely convinced, although he collaborated and he helped and he regendered and renamed all of the parts for female or like all the boyfriends have different names from how they originally were when they were girlfriends. He was very involved in all of those things. But it was the first preview in London. He said, I wasn't sure, but I was wrong. This is exactly how it should be done. And it was amazing. I don't think I'll ever forget that night. And then he was, from that moment onwards, he was nothing but the greatest champion of the show. So we had an amazing time. And, he was just supportive the whole way from then onwards.
Love that, especially that story about the cameraman. You can't write a better ending.
No, he loved
something
that.
Like that.
He loved it, and he said that is genuinely one of the most significant moments of the whole journey of him deciding whether or not he should allow us. So that cameraman has done very well by us. I sent him a crate of champagne.
I was about to say, I hope you sent him something.
I did.
Patti, you worked with him on so many of his shows. What was Stephen Sondheim like as a collaborator for you?
Well, see, I have to clarify that because I never created a role. I only recreated a role.
Sure.
Roles that I've played. So Stephen wasn't in the rehearsal room every single day, which is my loss. But when he did come in, it was a scary time. He's a taskmaster and he's an exacting master. And, I have to say this, when he died, my first thought was, who will make me better? Because of his insistence on singing every note correctly and hopefully understanding the complexity of his thoughts in the lyrics. I've just never had an instructor like that. I've never had a teacher like that, except, maybe one or two teachers at Juilliard for acting, but I haven't had that in musical theater, which is what I do primarily. He's given some notes that have destroyed me, literally destroyed me. One diatribe was, I said in my head while I was listening to him go off on me, that if anybody had less experience than me, they would have turned in their equity cards. It was so eviscerating. And ultimately, I didn't understand what he was saying. And so I went around and asked sound people, the conductor, the director, my dresser, and the person that actually illuminated it was the B sound who passes out the microphone. She said, well, Patti, when you get emotional, sometimes it's difficult to understand you. And I went, thank you. That's what he was trying to say.
That's the note.
But what he was saying destroyed me. All I remember is monotonous mush. And it went on for about 10 minutes. But then there were other times when he complimented me, and I thought, where do I go from here? Where do I go from here?
Right.
How can I be better for him?
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't
the highest praise from just, yeah.
It wasn't about pleasing him, but it was about growing. It was about understanding how deep and how difficult it is to do what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Katrina, were there any notes that he gave you during this process that were hopefully not destructive in that way, but insightful, illuminating, that helped you find this character?
Well, what I just love about him, which he wanted, like, all of his work to just keep improving. So like what you were saying, Patti, he would say those things to himself. I think he was always seemed to be working on getting better and making the thing better. And he was so interested in, like, how can we keep tweaking this song or these lyrics or whatever to keep moving this farther and farther towards a better version of the thing. So that was really inspiring. And then the joy that he took in collaborating and being in the room and appreciating what everyone was doing. And he was not going to tell you something that wasn't what he thought, which is sometimes great and sometimes really difficult to swallow. But he was an honest note giver, I guess. Like he wasn't gonna BS you about what he thought.
Mm-hmm.
He loved his cast. I mean, when he came to the first preview, when we came back, 10 days before he died, I mean, he said it was one of the greatest nights of his life. And he loved this cast and he loved the production. He loved Marianne's work on it, but he particularly loved the cast. And that was what was so, oh gosh, it's very emotional when I think back that he was there with us only 10 days before he died, but he loved it. I mean, it was an extraordinary journey to have gone on from him not so sure through to, the end of his life.
Yeah, it's a tremendous gift. Here's an interesting question from MK. What do you think happens to Bobby afterwards? Why does she miss the party and what does she do instead?
I'm very interested in what MK thinks the answer to this question. I think what the audience decides, whatever the person in the audience thinks happens is what happens. That's the meaning of the piece. That, to see. Yeah, that's what I think. And I don't know that she. And
maybe
what's
she
so
does,
beautiful
maybe she
about
doesn't.
it is that maybe she does, but like, what do you want Bobby to have done? And then what does that say about what you want for yourself? I think is what I'm super interested in.
Absolutely. Here is another question. Let's see. This one is from Elizabeth. If you could swap roles with anyone in the cast, who would you choose and why? And I'll also say to Chris, if you were to insert yourself into the show, who would you play?
Well, being alive is obviously so deeply personal for me. Gosh, I cannot act, and B, I cannot sing. So the idea of inserting myself in the show at all is kind of laughable. But there are two moments in the show when during the opening number of Company, when they sing all those photos up on the wall, I just think of my family and I cry every single night. And then when Katrina sings Being Alive, it is so, as Patti said, it's so revelatory the way that Katrina does it. It's never been done like that before. And I am just in pieces. So I'm not sure I could ever insert myself in it. I'm in awe of it.
Katrina, Patti?
I'm happy where I am, thank you.
You're good?
I would like to be one of the people that dances in the background of the club. Like the whole cast gets to dance, up there, upstage, while the ladies' lunch scene is happening. And their costumes are incredible, and they get to do some very fun and odd sort of dance moves. Someone has a tiny dog and a purse. It's like it's very exciting up there. So
I'll close out with this last one, which I think is interesting. So Annie asks, as discussed, the gender swap of companies seems like a natural approach to refreshing this text. Is there another show or role you think would benefit from revisiting through the lens of a gender swap? And a very good example, a colleague of mine interviewed Andrew Garfield and Robin DeJesus about Tick, Tick, Boom, and they jokingly suggested a Audra McDonald Sweeney Todd. And the second I heard that, I was like, I would buy tickets to see that. So is there another show that you similarly think could be fun to play around with the genders in?
Shall I jump in? I think I've thought about this quite a lot because obviously, I think what it should never do is feel like a gimmick, because that's the thing that I think is so great about this production is it's just true to the material. I think, I've certainly seen other productions of plays where things have been regendered. And I'm always a little cynical of it. Actually, it just the material has to speak to it. It has to say something to it, and that's what. As yet, I haven't found anything that I think is the natural fit in that way that it is with the gender switch of company. But listen, I'm sure it will happen, and there will be more of it. But it as long as the material supports the idea, that's the key.
Right. I think it gets into the bigger question also of just, revivals you can restage a classic and it is a classic and it is, a beautiful show just restaged again in another era, another language, another cast, another year. But then there's also things like what you guys have done here, or I was so blown away by the revival of Oklahoma a few years ago that really take a different approach to things. And I guess that's the question of, should revivals sort of reframe the text or look back at it, or does it depend on the show? I'd be curious for your opinions on that, for anybody who wants to answer.
We just one thing, we did a production of Death of a Salesman in London 2 years ago, just before the pandemic, and Marianne directed it with a colleague, Miranda Cromwell, and the Lohman family for the first time were an African-American family. So I think there are ways that classics can be taken and looked at through a different lens rather than just there are ways of reinterpreting, bringing something up to date, or maybe taking it into another period backwards in time can be really illuminating. But the text it's got to be a reason for it.
Katrina, Patti, do you guys agree?
Yes. I do. I have to say that years ago, and I never saw the movie Theater of Blood with Vincent Price. It Kills the Critics. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
So somebody wanted to play the Vincent Price role. They were going to make it a musical, which is a great idea. Only they couldn't get the rights from whoever the film distributor was. I would love to do that one, but I agree with Chris that it has to. It can't compromise the original tension of the piece, and it really can't be a gimmick. It's just it's rude.
I agree, and I agree, and also crave more new things, like new works that are written, and I'm looking forward to those.
Absolutely. Chris is in London doing one of them right now. Very exciting. I want to thank everyone so much for being here. I am honored to be in such illustrious company. Company is playing at the Bernard Jacobs Theater in New York. You can find information about tickets on the show's website. I really hope that as many of you as possible will get to see the show and these incredible actors. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Bye, Chris.
Bye, I love you. I miss you. I'll see you soon. Bye.